All right, welcome everyone to this episode of the Clark Connection podcast. A little bit different than my typical podcast in that this one I'm wanting to do as a tribute to my late grandfather. So this one's going out to Billy Brown Clark, aka Billy B, and you'll also hear me refer to him as Granddaddy or Granddad. Um, so that if you're listening, I hope you find value in this story. Um, so no real notes here, just kind of going off the top of my head. Um, so we'll see where this goes. We'll see where this takes us. But so Granddad was born on February 23rd, 1933, in a very small town in North Mississippi. Grew up as a relatively poor young man, and throwing it out there, he was poor. Um, Kind of like falls in line of if you've ever heard the phrase of goody two shoes. Well, that comes about because only rich people had two shoes that they could wear. The poor people, in order to ride in public transportation, they shared a shoe. Um, or as he used to tell me, that they were so poor they didn't have a pot to piss in. Like, that kind of gets you, I mean, very much a rags to riches story right here. And, it's one that I told many of my students that if he could do it, you could do it. And so they started off real small town. Um, I remember asking him about, what did he know about his dad and what does he know about his grand. And he tells me the last memory he has of his father was them leaving the house. That with him, they passed out in a chair as they left. Um, didn't have a whole lot of glamour to his childhood. Often would tell me stories of having to steal food from their neighbor's garden. Finding it wherever they could. You know. And nothing I've ever dealt with. The one I try not to make sure I do, but I wore in honor of him, was that work shirt. Um, because when you know that original story of not knowing where your next meal was going to come from, to being able to have the things that he has not had and was able to provide for his family, it's really quite the story when you think about it. And so, one of the things that I always learned from him was how important hard work was. And he would always tell us that one he used to brag about all the time. That was his paper route. He talked about from the time he was a young boy all the way through high school. He had a paper route, um, and he delivered newspapers in the morning before he went to school, and in the afternoon after he left school, just to be able to provide, to help his mom and his brothers and his sisters. They put food on the table and pay the bills. They had to make ends meet. And oftentimes that wasn't enough. Um, he would tell us that he would do anything for an honest buck, or really an honest nickel. He would do whatever it took. If it was legal and he wouldn't get in trouble, he would do it. From shining shoes, to fixing stuff around the neighborhood, whatever he could, he would do it. So honestly, no real surprise. When I look back on it, that he would soon one day join the military. Halfway through his senior year, they dropped out of school, that out of high school to join the military. And that pretty common thing. We even see it today, that where people will join the military just to try to help get out of the situation they're in. So to me, there was no surprise after hearing that he joined the military. Then actually he couldn't join the military because he hadn't graduated from high school, and he didn't have a high school diploma, or he wasn't 18. And so he always says he lied about his age to try to get him to let him in sooner. And then got his GED because his recruiter told him he needed to. And then went to boot camp. And so wasn't allowed to get his GED until his graduating class actually graduated. So 6 months later, he finally gets his GED. But he joined the Air Force, and when he joined the Air Force, that was, where he learned more about hard work. Because, to make it through boot camp and to make it through, and just really to survive in the military, you had to work hard. But he learned a lot during this time, during the stint, that really shaped what would go about and become the rest of his past. Really, it laid the foundation. That paperwork and always having to work, never really getting much of the childhood to participate in other things. It really got solidified in the military, because in the military, Granddad would always say that that lieutenant is the one that really got him on that pursuit of perfection and excellence, because he wouldn't allow Granddad to turn anything in, or anything that lieutenant had to sign his name on, that wasn't perfect. So if there was a smudge on the paper, you redid it. If there was a misspelled word, you redid it. If he could tell you erase something and tried to type over it, you redid it. If there was a whiteout, you redid it. He wasn't putting his name on anything that wasn't perfect. And he used to say he knew by the time when he messed up, just stop and start over. But one I'd forgot to say, even on the paper route, that his, dedication to hard work and wanting to provide, is he made sure he was the first person there to make sure he got his papers in his bag. Because if he could get all of his bag loaded and get started, he was going to make more money than the rest of them. So it started at a really young age. In there as well, when he got into the military, I learned about all the pursuit of excellence and how important it was to try to be excellent and pursue and continue to go after that. was in there in the military for the Korean War for 4 years, and came back home and went to work for a car dealership. He knew sales. He knew if he wanted to make money and make money fast, that sales was where it was. Um, and so he started that, and he always credits his boss for that, telling him, he was like, "Weren't you in the military?" I was like, "Well, yes, sir." And it's like, "Well, didn't you get the GI Bill?" He said, "Well, yes, sir." And he goes, "Son, you need to go to college. They're going to pay for you to go to college. You need to go and get your college degree because that's going to open so many doors for you." And so I went ahead and moved back, got all that done, moved back to Monroe, Louisiana. And as he likes to say it, when he had a new neighbor move in, when he got back home, that was when he saw the prettiest woman he had ever seen. And he had a new mission in life. And that new mission, that was to get that pretty little girl that had to fall in love with him. And so the story as he tells it, as he found out that she was riding the bus to go to college and knew they were going to the same place. So he would go through, and he said every single morning I would show up to that bus stop and say, "Hey, you want to catch a ride to school?" And I'd ask her in the afternoon, "Hey, do you want to catch a ride to school? I got to go to school anyways. That wouldn't be a problem if you rode with me." And so finally, after enough of asking, being persistent, then my grandmother finally said yes. And, well, the rest, as you know, is history. But he worked hard during that time, got his bachelor's degree from the Northeastern University at the time, which is now the University of Louisiana Monroe. And got an education. He got a bachelor's in business education and went to work. I got hired out in Grand Cane. Went and worked at Grand Cane High School as a business teacher and the business typing, and that was the head boys and girls basketball coach. And so he talks about that a lot. He really, 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 they enjoyed his time as a basketball coach and a teacher. But he always said, "Man, you put in way too much work to do what you do as a coach." And so he would always tell me that, especially while I was coaching. He's like, "Boy, when you go get back in the business and help us make some money, because you ain't," he said, "I know you about to starve working as a coach." He would always, "Now, boy, let me tell you." When he would talk about how, he'd work those players, and how he wasn't going to take nothing from none of his students about the work that they were doing in class. If you were going to do it, you were going to do it right. And there was no way you were going to do it the wrong way. Funny how that military, they kicked in right there, right? And so eventually he and Grandmama moved to Baton Rouge, to Central Louisiana, and he got a job as a business and typing teacher at Central High School. That and kind of same principle. Now he always said he would tell Mr. wasn't Duvall. Who was it? I'm trying to remember who he said his principal was, but he kept telling him, "I'm not coaching. I ain't coaching." And he knew that what type of work he was going to be put in to do, and said, "Look, I'm just not doing it." Had one of his students at his funeral yesterday come up to me and say, "Me and another guy, we took your grandfather for typing class." And so why we ended up in that typing class is because that we knew there was going to be a bunch of girls in there, and so we wanted to be around all the girls. And he said, so first day of class, we get in there, We was sitting in the middle, all amongst the girls. And as he called roll, he waited right at the end after he got done. He said, "Now, look, y'all take y'all's chairs, and you see those two spots over in the back? I want y'all to sit over there because I know exactly why you're taking this typing class, and I promise you, you go learn typing while you're in here." And so many of his former students said the same thing. They said, when they got into class, that we learned how to type because Billy B wasn't going to allow, or as Mr. Clark wasn't going to allow us to learn any other way than to learn the right way. And he was going to make sure we learned. He didn't care how long it took him, but he was going to help us learn. Um, and so we learned a lot through that as he was, it was preparing him for what he needed to do as a business owner. Next day, that he moved into. And it was during this time as a teacher, him and grandmother had their three children. They ended up with their oldest is Lisa, middle Billy, and then my dad is David. There was also Billy Jr. who they died right shortly after birth. So sorry, it was Lisa, Billy Jr., Billy, and David. But it was shortly after he got into teaching at Central, that he realized I'm not making enough money. I got to do more. I got to make more. I got to really provide for my family. And so he eventually moved on and became a textbook salesman. Traveled all over Louisiana, up and down. They're selling textbooks. And so, after a few years, he started realizing that I'm the top sales. I've been the last several years. I've been the top salesman. I'm making more money for this company than they will pay me. Now I'm going to start my own business because if I can do it for them, I can do it for me. And so he started looking. And well, in 1972, he found that his business, like committed to education. Oddly enough, that's where he stayed, and he saw the opportunity to buy Delta School of Business. And funny enough, I'm drawing a blank on the guy that he bought the business from. He always says he's so thankful for that guy and that he was dishonest with him. Because had he known that what he knew after he bought the business, he wouldn't have bought Delta School of Business. So a bankrupt business when he bought it. Now he knew it wasn't doing well, but he didn't know it was doing that bad. And so that granddad took over that old broke business, found out that it was probably twice to three times in debt as it was when he purchased it. And so instead of being just by today's equivalent, anywhere from $1 to $2 million in debt, he was about $4 to $5 million in debt. uh, So he said he didn't realize he owed a whole lot of people money that he didn't know he owed a whole lot of people money. And so officially became his in January of 1973. And then in September of 73, he moved from where the school was in Baker, Louisiana, to where it currently resides on Exchange Place in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And we've been there now this makes 51 years. In September will be 52 years. So I mean, that'll be 51 years. We're on year 50 right now. But anyways, so he was telling, so he tells that story about that all the time. One that they'd told me on the first day. He's going to open up his first class. They had a bad rainstorm come through. Oh, that, and behind it there's a ditch, and the ditch got backed up, and he came into the floor. And I can just imagine how much a fussing and a cussing was going on, and as they're trying to they get the water out, and they get ready for the first day of school, get the floors dry, and so he said he stayed up all night trying to get ready for the first day of class. Oh man, he was quite the character. It's not something you see very often anymore. People, that's one I see a lot. Is people would there's too many people that would have quit with just that. They would have quit with just that. Um, they, as he likes to tell it, he about starved for the first 5 years of the business. He said it was so they didn't make a dime during that time. But Granddad was quite I use the term a lot, relentless. He was pretty relentless. He was resilient. He was smart. He says that during that time, that the only way he could survive is he paid himself, as he borrowed money. So he got a loan off of his loan. He would borrow money to pay his salary, their mortgage, and that everything came out to be. I think he said it was right at about $400, and so he borrowed $500. Now all their bills, and that left him about $100 for the month for groceries. He said we about starved um, for 5 years. And it took about 8 years from what he'd said. It took about 8 years for the business to finally break even. And then he said in '82 is when they finally turned around and started making money. About that time, he started collecting other businesses. Well, several of his other business friends that told him, during the process, whatever you do, Bill, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Now you got to divvy them out, put them in several other baskets, and so he did. He Good night. He had a Honda dealership, a Kawasaki dealership. Um, they ended up with Sea-Doo, John Deere dealership. Eventually purchased Harley Davidson in New Orleans, and so that came about in '83 or '84. That always known that it took place, that the deal was made on a notepad, but I didn't realize that it was in a hotel lobby where he met the man, and they made a deal for Billy B to purchase a Harley dealership. Now at the time, Harley didn't have that great of a reputation to the general public. He had said he always wanted a Harley Davidson, and when he had the opportunity, he said, "You know what? I'm gonna buy the dealership," uh, which is quite funny to hear my aunt and uncles tell the story of that, because they were all trying to convince him not to do it. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions he made, because that dealership ended up keeping the schools afloat for a little while. Um, was quite the guy when it came to that. But man, he did a lot too. For the motorcycle industry in Louisiana. Right now, they've got a rule, they've got law to where that you cannot open the same dealership or same manufacturing dealership within a 50-mile radius. Um, he went and lobbied the state senate and the state house, state congress, to try to get that put in place, because whenever he had his Honda dealership, they opened up. So at the time where he was, they opened up what is now known as Friendly Honda Yamaha. Now only about 10 miles away. And so that rubbed him quite the wrong way, that Honda would allow somebody to do that. And so he went and he fought. He fought on behalf that and got it put into law that if the dealership if they wanted to open up a new dealership, the same manufacturer, it had to be outside of the 50-mile radius of where that location was. Um, they also another one that he got in. They acted into law, which I knew he had done, but I didn't realize the impact that it's made on a lot of our dealers that in the state of Louisiana is they we talked about the Sea-Doo. So he had he had the Sea-Doo line, and oh God, he talks about the Sea-Doo and Honda. He's got had some bad stuff to say about owning that line of business. But and whenever he decided he wanted to get out because they put another Sea-Doo dealership and they put another Honda dealership right there next to him, that he wanted out and thought that the dealership should buy back what they sold to him, so everything. And so he went and got it put. He went and again. He went and worked around the state Congress and was able to get it put into law to where now if you are forced to close by the dealership or something happens like that and they want you to shut down to give it to somebody else, the dealership has to buy you out of everything. And so I've had several owners tell me that once they realized who I was, because being in the motocross scene and the motorcycle business arena now, I've had several tell me that Granddad has saved their business. They were huge fans of Billy B because Billy B saved their business. Um, I'll tell you, that's one thing about Granddad is he often did a lot of things with the intention of helping others. Now he knew it wasn't right what they were doing because all they were trying to do was make a buck. He knew that corporate didn't care about him, the business owner, the one who was there. They were just trying to move as much product as possible and let the strong survive. Um, and he knew that wasn't right because of what these parents, these families were putting to purchase the dealership to make that happen. Um, Now, again, just quite an incredible man as he went to fight in for the schools or for the motorcycle industry. Um, Speaking of the schools, he did a lot to fight for proprietary and secondary education in the state of Louisiana. I've heard stories from that's where I'm currently in now, and just kind of listening to guys and gals that have been around a while, listening to them talk about um, just some of the stuff that he helped move through. Legislation that got passed, lobbying the nursing board to allow a proprietary school or a private small college, a trade school. They teach nursing. Um, it's really quite special to think of how he went through and just helped um, so many schools, and it wasn't about his school, it was about the industry, but more important than that, it was about helping the student, it was about the students and helping people to change their lives, because he knew what a shot education did for him. He knew how that impacted him and really helped change his life. And so he wanted to give that back. And during those early years, he talks about, how bad the struggle was, that he took out a second mortgage on his house. This is one grandmama tells me. She said he did that, and he didn't tell me he was doing that, and that made me mad. He put out a second mortgage on our home, took out a loan on our home for that business. Uh, and he always said, you got to remember those people that helped you out. The That's why he always banked with Zachary Bank, or the her first bank is Zachary, because they gave him that mortgage and that loan that he needed to make it through. Um, he told the bank he only needed $10,000, and so the adjuster that came out went out and said, "You know what? We can get you up to 20,000. Why don't we go ahead?" And Granddad, I can just hear this. "Well, I told you I don't need it. I only need 10,000. 10,000's going to get me through." He finally listened to. He said, "Look, Mr. Clark, if you let's say you need an extra 10, so if you need up to 20,000, then you can come back and get it. But look, let's do it for 20. You only got to take out 10. But if you need it later on, you can come back and get it." he said, he goes, "I'll be darned. It wasn't it wasn't a whole year later that I was back there. I was going to get that extra $10,000 because I needed that $10,000. So I was so grateful he talked me into getting the 20 instead of the 30. Oh, jeez. But I mean, those were the things that he went and did. Um, he talked. He talked a lot too, and and kind of finishing up on the schools and whatnot. He took that and several other those other businesses. He took that, but it all started with that one broke school of Delta School of Business that he took. And he'll tell you he worked his butt off. He worked hard. He worked day, night, weekend, holiday, to make sure that he provided for his family. It's in the book of Proverbs it talks about a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And he took that to heart. But I mean, even more than that, then, when he passed, three children, or six as he likes to say, three by birth, three by marriage, um, had 15 grandchildren, plus another 11 through marriage, and 26 great grandchildren. He wanted to set up, and he wanted to make sure that his family was provided for, and he wanted to make sure that none of us experienced what it was like. That to have that hardship, to have that struggle, to have the worry if you were going to eat today, if you were going to have the lights on, if you were going to have running water in your house. He wanted that for us. And so he really went out and did it. He took that one broke school that I tell you, I don't know if any of us could do that now. And he turned it into right now, which is at 7 campuses, 7 schools in 7 cities, really 6 cities. Now, thriving in business. But as he worked through it, he would always tell me, you got to work hard, son. Son, anything, he would say, Aaron, anything worth having is worth working for. You're going to have to work for it, Aaron. And if it's really worth having, you're going to have to work hard. And son, when hard work doesn't work harder. And so he would always tell me that, as you're going out and trying to achieve great things and go get excellence and go be a success, whatever your definition of success is. He would always say, there's going to be some late nights. He said, you're probably going to have a lot of late nights. Now you're going to miss out on some activities. You go have some friends, you go have some family members that don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. And then when you get there, they're all going to praise you and tell you they knew you could do it all along. He said there's always going to be those people waiting after that, because they were there while you were going through your struggle. He said, son, ain't none of them going to be there while you're going through your struggle. They'll all be there to cheer you on whenever you're winning. But where are they when it's 3 a.m. and you're struggling with the thoughts, can I do this? What should I be doing right now that I couldn't get to yesterday? What task do I have right now? What do I have to go and attack and do? Where were they when I was worried if I was going to be able to put food on the table? He said to do that, you're gonna lose friends. You'll lose time with your family. You'll lose time with doing things that you want to do. But he, as he got later in life, once he moved on to the mid-90s, he said, son, I was able to do whatever I wanted after that. And I knew that my family could do whatever they wanted after that. Because I didn't want them to struggle like I did. I don't want y'all to have to know what it's like to be scared to look through the mail. He told me once. He said things got so bad that in order to try to figure out how to pay his bills, that when he didn't have any money, he would put the electricity bill and the water company's envelope and mail it to the water company, and then put the water company's bill in the electric bill envelope and mail them off. That way, when they got it, they had to send it back to him and go, hey, you didn't send it to the right place. Because then they wouldn't hit him up for late fees and not trying to pay his bills. And so he would do this quite regularly to try to figure out how to get around paying bills. I told you, he was a smart guy. He was a character, man. He knew how to work the system and work what was best. But again, it was all to make sure that he provided for his family. He would often talk about that, just that struggle and how hard it was. He would talk about, his commitment, the commitment you needed to excellence. He would always talk about, son, you gotta, when you're coaching, when you, especially as I'm working at Delta, he would tell me, you gotta hold them accountable, son. He said, you ain't gotta be their friend. They got enough friends and they ain't gotta like you, but you gotta make sure they respect you. And you do this by making sure that you do what you tell them you're gonna do. And so if you tell them you go call them at 3 p.m., by golly, that phone better be ringing at 2:59, and because they're going to know that you called them at 3 p.m. and they're going to answer. He said you got to hold them accountable. If they say they're going to do this, you hold them to that. So if you set a standard, you hold them to that standard. And you don't let anybody get away with not hitting that standard. It doesn't matter who they are or what they do. The standard is the standard. And you make them do it. He understood that. Uh, he would often talk about how difficult it was to keep that business going and afloat. But winning has a funny way of doing that to you. It's for those of you who understand what I'm talking about. When it comes to winning, it's quite the elusive little creature. It'll show you that it's over there, then it'll disappear. It'll allow you to put your hands on it, and then it slithers off to the side, and you might think you're right next to it, and then you look, and it's miles away. It's quite the elusive little creature. Um, it's going to put you through hell just to see if you've got what it takes to win. But upon retirement, and this is kind of where most of how I knew Granddad was in his retirement stage. I can vaguely remember him working at Delta and going to visit him up on the second story of the building where his big red office was. It was very, very. I wish I still had a picture. I wish I had a picture of it. Very 80s esque. Can vaguely remember that. But when he retired, then he started the same thing. He wanted to make sure his property was the best in the property, and so oftentimes, I'd go spend the summers with him. We grew up down in New Orleans, and so Granddad and Grandma, we'd get to come and see him over the summer, and they would, I'd help him around the property, and we'd do stuff. He had big old tractors and bush hogs and bulldozers and everything else. All the man stuff. And so he enjoyed being able to teach us how to work on equipment and how to fix things, and they run the cattle and all that good stuff. Um, and it was one that I always never really understood was that how long it took for us to get certain tasks done. Good night. There would be a task that I know would only take about 30 minutes if I'd have been doing it by myself. And I know it only took that long because there were multiple times I did it by myself while he wasn't there. And, but it was about spending the time with us. He wanted to be able to pass those life lessons on. It was more so about the talking. It was more so about getting to know you. And, Granddad really got to know who you were and how you were, about how you worked. He said he could learn a lot about you because you could feel your grit, your grind, if you had it or didn't have it, or anything along those lines. Hey, he just knew that he wanted to be able to teach us that. And if he wanted you to come out there and work, he really enjoyed working with those that he knew were going to work hard. He would always tell me while we were out there, boy, when I was your age, I didn't walk nowhere. I don't know what you walking for, boy. When I was your age, I ran everywhere. I didn't know you could walk. I thought it was illegal to walk. But we talked about his past and where he came from. The rags to riches, and it was through a lot of hard work and his commitment to excellence and dedication. But I think, and Granddad loved us, it was very obvious that he loved us, and he was going to tell you that he loved us. I think love was the biggest thing that I took away from my grandfather, and that you really need to love and tell those around you that you love them. It was one thing he said very in his younger years. He didn't tell anybody he loved them. He didn't express that love. He didn't know how to do it. And not that he didn't know how to do it. He just didn't. You didn't do it if you were a man. But he soon learned that that wasn't the right thing to do. Um, and as he got later in his life, you really knew that he loved two things. Because he told you. He loved his family and he loved Jesus. Now, I mean, if you got around him, seriously, if you got around him for more than 30 seconds, he was going to talk to you about one or the other or both. It just depended on how long you were willing to listen for. That depended on what you heard from him. He never really met a stranger. But when he talked to people, he was going to tell them how much he and proud of his family he was. He loved talking about his family and seeing his family and visiting with his family. Um, some of it, and he never told me this, but I know some of it had to do with the fact that he didn't really get to know and never really knew his father, and siblings were always working, so they never really got to know each other and know what it was like to have a family that loved and supported them. And so he worked to show that. And the only way he knew how to show love was to make sure there was enough money to be put on the table, or to have food and water and clothes. He wanted to make sure he provided. He loved his family. And, oftentimes with that came a lot of hard truths. You know, um, I told this one the other day, and I think it's pretty funny. Um, so I've told y'all my oldest son plays golf. And so, we were preparing for a tournament, and we went and played the course that it was going to be on. And he shot a 86. And if you're not familiar with the sport of golf, if you can shoot under 100, you're pretty good. Like, you're in the top 20% of golfers in the world. Um, to get under 90 is really good. And if you're able to get under 80, a score under 80, you're extremely good. And if you're shooting at par, so around 70, you need to be signing up for the tour. And so we're coming home, and he was like, "Hey, we got to stop and we got to tell Granddad. We got to tell Granddad how I did. I need to be able to stop and tell him how my score is." And I was like, "All right, but son, I just want to prepare you. You may not get the results you want. You may not get the reaction you want. I'm just letting you know, trying to prepare you." And he's, "Oh no, no way, Dad, no way, Dad, no way, Dad." And so we get there, and sure enough, we go in, and he's like, "Hey, Granddad, guess what? I just got done playing around the golf." And Granddad, "Oh, how?" He was excited. "Tell me how you did." He said, "I shot an 86. And Granddad's kind of stopped, and he sat there and he goes, "Son, that's not very good." And I can tell you, I've played a lot of rounds with the old man. And I ain't never seen that old man shoot under. I lie. I seen him shoot under 100 like twice. And so, I mean, just the fact that he told my son that, and he was just so, like, "I can't believe he told me that." And I was like, "Look, I promise you, he's very proud of you. He's going to go brag to every single one of his friends that you shot under 90. But he doesn't want you to be satisfied with where you are." And so I was like, "You just got to go to work. That's all you got to do. Just keep working, keep working, keep working. Don't take it personal. He just wants to see you get better." And sure enough, We eventually, I guess it was probably about a year later, he finally broke 80 on a round. He shot a 78. And so we went back. I was like, "You want to go tell Granddad?" He's like, "I don't know." I said, "Look, let's go tell Granddad." And so we went and he brought him in. He was like, "Really? You shot a 78?" And he grabbed the scorecard and he went through and counted it because we might not have counted it correctly. And he was like, "Huh, 78? That's pretty impressive there." And so it's not that he was wanting to see my son do bad. He was just wanting him to aspire to do better. Don't be satisfied with where you are. And, that's what got him to where he is. That's what got him. I had somebody tell me yesterday that man, you shouldn't be so. Don't be sad because if I were to go through and create a bucket list of things to do and to get done, your granddad checked off every single one of them. How many people do you know that took a broke business, turned it into a success, and has been able to pass it down to the third generation? Check. He said, how many people do you know that were able to quit smoking cold turkey after smoking for 60 years? And that's a true story. He one morning, my granddad used to smoke. Oh God, he used to smoke. But one morning, he said I was walking down the hall, going to go put on the pot of coffee, about to go to work, and I was just a cough. I started coughing and coughing and coughing, and he goes, "You know what? I had enough of this. I quit." And that was that. He didn't pick up another cigarette. Now, he swears he was smoking from the time he was 68 and quit smoking. Or sorry, he was 8 and he quit smoking in his late 60s. So he said, I smoked for about, or sorry, that would be about 50 years. He said, I smoked from the time I was 8. I like to smoke. I just got tired of that coughing, so I quit. I mean, that tells you the mental fortitude that this man had. If you can quit smoking cold turkey, and I mean, guys, till the day he died, I never saw him pick up another cigarette. And when he quit, he quit. And that was one thing, that's something that we don't see very often anymore. Is he told you he was doing something. You talk about buying the Harley dealership on a notepad and making the deal in a notepad in a hotel lobby. But to him, your word was important. What the paper said was not important, but your word is what was important. And he meant that. Whatever you did and whatever you said, do it. Don't just say, yeah, I'm going to do this and then not do it. Do it. You know? But I mean, he did. He loved his family. He loved all of us. And, right at the end, I remember went in just to go see him. And this kind of will give you some tales of what to expect when you become a leader. And when you're trying to do great things. He said, I'd showed up. Wanted to check on him. And he goes, he was excited to see me, told me to come hug him, so I went and gave him a hug. And, because you weren't going to see him without giving him a hug, and you weren't going to leave without giving him a hug. And I hadn't even been there like 3 to 5 minutes, and he goes, "Son, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Well, I'm coming to check on you before I head into the office. I just want to make sure you're all right." And he goes, "I got this great staff around me to take care of me. And go take care of my business. If you're not there, who's working?" I was like, "Well, Granddad, I know you're trying to rush me out, but right now I don't want to leave you in here by yourself. That's just not right." And he had said, he goes, Aaron, I've been alone most of my life. He said, even in a crowded room, I was alone. And because not a lot of people knew what I was going through, and not a lot of people could relate to what I was going through. He said, I think you know where I'm at. I think you understand. He said, that's why people like you and me get along so well. Because we understand each other. We can exchange the harsh conversations and not be mad at each other. Because we both know we're going for wanting the same thing. And that's to win. He said, winners don't take that personal. But I remember sitting there with him. He always talked about grandmama and said, that was that's his sweetheart. That's the love of his life. And he was so concerned, to me, which was kind of ironic, to make sure that she was going to be taken care of. I promise, if you do some quick math of all the kids, between the close to 60 of us, that grandmama was going to be taken care of. And so they brought him back home. And the man was just extremely resilient. I mean, how many people, they get their pilot's license at 80? Now, he died at 91. So when he died Friday, June 28th, 2024, he was 91. At 80, he got his pilot's license. How many people do that? Now, the man had traveled all over the world. He'd owned had nice cars. He had a huge house on a large property. Lots of family. And so, I mean, the man just did a lot of incredible things. But who does that at 80? They goes and gets their pilot's license. He had so much, we were sitting around and we were just kind of, again, talking, going through, if this comes up and that, do this. I mean, he loved to learn. He loved to talk about stuff. Man, that was one thing he was always up for. One thing he was always up for was a good debate. Oh my goodness, he loved a good debate. And he would sometimes just pick a side just to pick a side. Even if it was the side you weren't on, he might not necessarily want to be on it, but he would pick that side just to just to have the debate. But as we were sitting around that last, before he went unconscious, we were just kind of talking, and he was recollecting what all happened and how things went throughout his life. I was like, Granddad, I was again worried about grandmama and who's going to take care of her, and I want to make sure that my 3 children and the 15 grandchildren and the 26 great grandchildren are taken care of. I was like, Granddad, look at what all you've done. There's nothing more you need to do, man. I'm so grateful for the fact that you provided for me and didn't allow me to experience what you did as a child. And he goes, son, take a look around. I got so much stuff. I got more stuff than I know what to do with. And son, all this stuff, it doesn't mean anything without Jesus. If you don't know Jesus as Lord and Savior, what are you doing? What are you waiting for? That was one that Granddad always wanted to know. Anybody he would come across that he could talk to. If you were that'd be working with him, or if you were going to work on him, if you were going to be in his vicinity, he would always ask, do you know Jesus? Do you know Jesus as Lord and Savior? Are you prepared to meet Jesus and tell him that I accepted you? Because if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell. If they don't accept Jesus, they're going to hell. And he would ask. And so, even though he was concerned about us and grandmama and everybody else, he was always more concerned, or what are we doing with Jesus? What are we doing with Jesus? I know I'm gonna see my grandfather again. He's up in heaven. Doesn't make it any less difficult to deal with. But he would ask you, so I don't know if anybody's still listening or if anybody listened at all. Doesn't matter to me if you did or if you didn't. But he would want to know, do you know Jesus? Do you know Jesus as personal Lord and Savior? And if you don't, what are you waiting for? Why wait? Why go another day, another second? We all won't be as fortunate as he was to to really know that at any given moment, he got, the last 5 years, he should have died in 2019 when they were trying to do a simple heart procedure that turned into not a simple heart procedure, that turned into him flatlining on the emergency room table. They had to finding out that he had a faulty pacemaker that ended up getting staph infection on it. And they'd told him in 2020, I said, Mr. Clark, there's two things that are going to happen. That if we leave that in there, you're going to die. But if we go in, that'd take it out, you're going to die on the table. And they basically said, which method of death do you want to take? And that old man, his body basically kicked the pacemaker out. Just an amazing man. But even then, while he was arguing with those guys, you would want to know, do you know Jesus? Do you know him as your Lord and Savior? Do you have a personal relationship with him? And so, guys, that's how I'm going to end it today. Is, do you know Jesus? Because none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. None of us are guaranteed to the next second. But do you know Jesus? If you don't know Jesus, reach out to me. I'm not putting anything else in there other than, in the description or anything else other than how to get in touch with me. And that's it. If you're looking to grow closer to Jesus, that's what he would want. He would want you to know, without a shadow of a doubt, with zero doubt at all, where you're going to be whenever you get to heaven. So don't wait. So if you listen this long, I appreciate it. I'm sure I rambled on a lot. And I'll end up telling a lot more stories. I'm sure there will be more that come to my head as we move along. But truly an amazing man. I'm a better man for having known him, for having him in my life. You hear me talk a lot about mentors, and it sucks. That losing not just your grandfather, but a mentor, somebody that you talked to and leaned on. that understood what I was going through. That's what sucks the most. But I know I'm going to see him again. I know I'll see him again. It's going to be up in heaven. And so, guys, if you don't know Jesus, don't wait. If you're not sure what to do, reach out to me. You can go to our motocross ministry, Faith Racers Ministry. You reach us there too. All of my contact information is going to be listed below. Reach out to me. Even if you just want to talk more about Jesus and grow in your faith, would love to talk to you and how to go help somebody else, because that's what our true Father would want us to do, is to grow in Jesus. And so, again, guys, I appreciate if you're on here, if you stayed around long enough through some of this rambling. I would love, I appreciate it. I just hope that what I did was honoring to my grandfather. This is the only take I'm going to take. I'm not redoing any of this. So if it makes no sense, oh well. But I will be back next week with the Clark Connection podcast. So I appreciate you hopping on. And the loving memory for Billy Brown Clark, and my grandfather, a true legend. So I'll talk to y'all soon.